Good morning and welcome to Politics at Jack and Sam's Daily, the podcast that tries to tell you first thing in the morning everything that's coming up ahead in the British politics today in less than 20 minutes. And the clock is running, Sam, so let's get going.
Good morning from Brighton. It's Tuesday, the 17th of September, the final day of Lib Dem Conference. My name is Sam Coates of Sky News, and with me is Jack Blanchard of Politico.
And Jack Blanchard of Politico is very much still in London. I have not made it down to Brighton for the Lib Dem Conference for my sins, although we do have a crack team of reporters down there covering it, of course, because they are Britain's third party. Sam, have you had a good time? It's coming to an end. Have you enjoyed it?
They have had a brilliant time.
I think listeners will note that Sam Coates did not answer the question if he's had a good time at the Lib Dem Conference.
And as I walked back along the seafront, they were in full voice at the Glee Club. I didn't manage to get in to the closing party of the Lib Dems, which takes place on the final night. But they were all...
Let's just tell listeners what Glee Club is. If you haven't had the joy of Lib Dem Conference, which I suppose not everybody's ever managed to fit into their lives, every year they all get together one night of conference and they sing extremely rude songs at the top of the voices while blind drunk about all of their political enemies. And it's actually quite funny for the Lib Dems, isn't it?
This year we had an ode to Liz Truss called Lettuce Be. Another song was introduced for 30 Tory candidates, and it's called Losing Your Deposits. So
there you go.
If you love that humour, if you love that vibe, it looked like a very sweaty room. I'm not sure there were many windows in it, but that was the the night before the big day of Ed Davey's speech. Is one of the things that we're going to be talking about today.
We've got lots of different things we're going to be talking about. Parliament, I should say, is in recess, of course, but Labour are still very much in the headlines with what we go alternatively calling frockgate or freebiegate or various other possible gates about Keir Starmer and his wife and their tailoring is the first real scandal, if you can call it that, to hit the Labour Party in government. So we'll definitely be talking a bit about that. It's on several front pages today. We'll be talking about the Lib Dems as well, of course, and we'll be talking about a new book that's coming out on the general election and what it means for Labour's perhaps more fragile majority than you might think.
And if you've got any questions, please WhatsApp us on 07511 867 633. 07511 867 633. Send us a message, send us a voice note, ask us a question, and we'll play it and answer it.
We didn't really get into this on the podcast yesterday, Sam, so we thought we should talk about it today, freebiegate or frockgate or whatever. Do you reckon you could explain to our listeners in about 20 seconds what this story is actually about? Say people that don't read the papers obsessively or worry exactly about where Keir Starmer gets his suits from.
One of the striking things about the Prime Minister, and this was true when he was leader of the opposition and as Prime Minister, has been his willingness to take freebies. Now, they can be football matches, they can be trips to the theatre. If you look at his register of members' interests, it stretches across 3 pages, his lists of hospitality. But it appeared that Downing Street in the last few days panicked because they realised that Keir Starmer's wife, Victoria, had been getting personal shopping and clothes from the Labour donor, Wahid Ali, but they hadn't been disclosed, and they went to the Parliamentary Commissioners for Standards, had a conversation with them about that lack of disclosure, and have decided that was wrong, and those details will now appear. And that has sparked a debate about whether the freebies are in the first place were right, whether or not a Prime Minister or his spouse should accept things like that, and whether or not he was within the rules. It's important to say that last night it appears that the Parliamentary Commissioners for Standards said he wouldn't be opening an investigation. So that leg of the story looks like it's not going any further, but that hasn't stopped it hitting several of the front pages this morning, slightly more than 20 seconds.
So it was a good effort. It was a good effort. So essentially you have like a month as an MP or indeed a Prime Minister to declare gifts if they're given to you so that they're all on a public register and everyone can see who's been given what. And they say they forgot to do this and then remembered and then declared it, and it was a bit late, but they did it of their own volition. And Keir Starmer says yesterday, I insist on the rules. He had asked his team for advice and blah, 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 went ahead and declared it. Sam, does any of this matter? Do people out in the country care whether Lady Starmer gets her clothes from, and do they care whether those gifts were declared within 28 days or 36 days or 42 days. It's going to make a blind bit of difference.
The opposition are going to try and make the public care. I think it is one of those stories that ends up being a talking point because it's quite easy to understand and plays into that sense that there is some unfairness about the way that politicians live their lives compared to ordinary people, and parallels are then drawn with whatever nasty decisions that politicians are making, Keir Starmer and the winter fuel cut. In of itself, I don't think that this story will change the narrative around Keir Starmer, but I do think it raises a couple of questions that are likely to be ongoing. The first is just that reliance on freebies. It's odd, and it is at odds with most of our previous prime ministers. And we all pointed out with vigour when Boris Johnson took, you remember the money that he initially took to refurbish Downing Street's flat, change the wallpaper, and the fuss that was caused around that. And just the thing that was striking overnight, the thing that's kind of given this new prominence, was the vehemence with which Keir Starmer has defended his right to take things like tickets to football matches. On his way back from Rome, he said, the problem is, let's take football as an example. I'm a massive Arsenal fan. I can't go to the stands because of security reasons. Therefore, if I don't accept a gift of hospitality, I can't go to a game. You could say, well, bad luck. That's why the gifts have to be registered. But, never going to an Arsenal game again because I can't accept hospitality is pushing it a bit far. The issue around that is nobody wants to deny, I don't think, Keir Starmer his favourite pastime, undoubtedly football. But the question is, who is providing the tickets? Why are they providing the tickets? Is a pattern of declaration something that we need to keep a closer eye on? There is a reason that these things are transparent after all. And I think, in fact, I know that there are people around Keir Starmer in his inner circle who don't like this at all and would rather he didn't do it because it is a complication and will end up causing a fuss every time he does something new.
My observation would be that Keir Starmer sees himself as an incredibly principled public servant, right, without a whiff of scandal around him. And it's possible he is therefore a little bit blind to how things can look. And he did a very good job in opposition of painting himself in stark contrast, particularly to Boris Johnson, around whom there was always a whiff of scandal because he is a pretty whiffy, scandalousy kind of guy, isn't he? Keir Starmer would see himself as very different from that. And the problem for Keir Starmer is if he is blind to this sort of thing, even if this is all really kind of above board and he is not, a corrupt prime minister or whatever his opponents want to throw at him, even to be associated with the kinds of stories that were around Boris Johnson is really bad for his brand because he is trying to implement himself in people's minds a very different kind of prime minister. And so I think these kind of front pages that we're seeing today, admittedly from very right-wing papers who are very opposed to Labour, are not good for him because people just get a general sense of, oh, they're all the same. And the whole point of Keir Starmer, the way he's defined himself against the Conservatives, is that, oh, no, we're not all the same. This is a government of public service and duty and all the things that he likes to talk about slightly piously. If the public start to decide, oh, no, that's not the case, then really, what is the point in this Labour government? So I definitely think he needs to be careful.
One of the curiosities is whether it was that statement about needing to go to the Arsenal game or the other actions they've taken, is the stubbornness towards this. Not only is he clear that he's not going to do it, but yesterday there was a striking moment where Victoria Starmer, Lady Starmer, went to London Fashion Week with, as the Mail would put it, clothes that weren't hers, the custom-made designer top and trousers, which were on loan to her. It was that loan that kicked off the conversation with the Parliamentary Commissioner for Standards that led them to realise that they should have declared the freebies that she was getting as well as her husband's. But the fact that they were happy to put her out yesterday, given that there was this story and fuss around her declarations and her clothing, with these incredibly striking images. I think other administrations would have thought twice about letting that photo opportunity go ahead. There is a dogged determination to ignore this stuff, even though, because, as you say, of the way Keir Starmer has pitched himself, arguably that element of his reputation has further to fall because of how he painted himself as leader of the opposition.
Which takes us neatly, Sam, into a new book that's coming out on the general election, which I've been flicking through some of the extracts from. There's a book launched tonight. This is the new book by Anushka Astana, who is at ITV News, about the general election, how Labour came back to power. And one of the extracts she talks about is just how fragile Labour's majority really is. You wouldn't think it from looking at their colossal number of MPs in the House of Commons. But in fact, she talks about a briefing by a guy called Paul Ovenden, who probably you and I know quite well, who's a director of strategy in Downing Street now, about how really it was the Reform UK surge. It was former Tories voting for reform that really delivered Labour this landslide, and that is a very fragile basis for big government. We have no idea how that one is going to play out next time round. It also talks about lots of people voting with their hearts, going to the Greens and the Independents, and how really this enormous electoral coalition that Keir Starmer appeared to have built in the summer could very quickly fall away. And so what you would think from looking at these numbers is, oh, well, you win that big, you've definitely got a decade in power. Like, there's no way you're going to lose the next election from this position of strength. Lots of people inside Labour think that that is not true. We've got Paul Ovenden telling ministers it's essentially 0-0 in the race for the next election, if you can use a football analogy. And so things like these very minor scandalous stories that we've seen breaking this week, if from a position of 0-0, from a position of this is going to be a tight general election next time round, all of this stuff actually really matters electorally. Not just in terms of Keir Starmer's image, but actually in terms of who is going to win the election, assuming the Tories can find themselves a sensible leader who takes them in a sensible direction and gets them electorally match fit for the next election.
One of the people warning about the volatility of the electorate in the run-up to the election and subsequent to the election has been Morgan McSweeney, the sort of chief strategist for Keir Starmer. And there's a story in Anushka's book about Morgan McSweeney that I particularly enjoyed. He sort of turned his attention to how to sort of destroy the Corbynite wing of the Labour Party, particularly after that appearance by Jeremy Corbyn at Glastonbury in 2017. And in a briefing to Guardian journalists, he basically was saying you had to kill this sort of rival upstart news site called The Canary, very left-wing organ that was sort of backing Jeremy Corbyn. Destroy The Canary or The Canary destroys us, Morgan McSweeney told Labour Together. And that was one of the extracts in the book. Well, I've just noticed The Canary have hit back. And with a big headline on their website, The Canary are this week saying, "Sleep with one eye open, McSweeney." And they said, mark our words, the Canary will now hold Starmer, the Labour Party, and this government fully to account with more fervour than any ever before. That includes McSweeney. So if we bump into Morgan at Labour conference, we'll be asking him whether or not he's sleeping with one eye open in case the Canary comes around the door.
I should say we've been carrying extracts from another book that's about to come about with the election by my colleague here at Politico, Tim Ross, which has other interesting stories about Morgan McSweeney and his approach to the election. Apparently the entire thing was modelled entirely on Lynton Crosby's approach to winning elections, which he did so successfully for the Tories in previous years. And you could see that, I think, in the sort of message discipline from Labour on the refusal to get sucked into what Lynton used to call barnacles on the boat, talking about all sorts of different issues, but focus very, very relentlessly on a few small things and be pretty brutal in that. And you can win big. I mean, it doesn't always tell you very much about how a party's going to govern. It might not be the most dare I say, healthy approach to democracy. But, you got to win if you want to win power. And it seems like what Labour really did was take lessons from the Tories, having sat there in 14 years in opposition and watched them defeat them again and again and again. They decided to mimic the approach, and sure enough, were able to do so. OK, let's head back down to Brighton. And it's Ed Davey's speech just after lunch. The Liberal Democrat leader will give his first big speech since that record-breaking win at the general election for his party. And what is fascinating about the address that he's going to give after lunch is, yes, he will criticise the Labour Party, but so much of this speech, and indeed quite a lot of the extracts that have been given to journalists overnight for us to talk about this morning, are aimed at going one more time
for the Conservatives. Ed Davey is going to be talking about promising to finish the job defeating Conservative MPs and the Conservative Party being unfit to govern and unfit for opposition too. Now, with just over 120 MPs, you would have thought that that was pretty much job done at the last election. But talking to some of the new cohort, some veteran Lib Dem MPs, they still see the importance of attacking the Tory party as absolutely central to their mission. But they still seem to be deciding quite how to do it, whether or not to position themselves a little bit centre-right, to put themselves in prime position to catch those voters that might otherwise have gone to the Tories, or whether to go a little bit further left to their comfort zone and spend and occupy that bit of the political spectrum that they most enjoy, criticising the government for cuts, for warning about austerity and warning that the government should be spending more on key priorities like the NHS and social care. The latter feels like where the Liberal Democrats want to go, while strategically it sounds like where they ought to go is trying to make sure, if they do want to continue to get votes and voters that otherwise would have lent towards the Conservatives, maybe move in the opposite direction.
Yeah, it's really interesting that a party essentially torn in two directions, sort of head pulling you one way and heart pulling you the other way. There's a sort of tendency to assume that this is the high water mark of Lib Demery, that the only way is down from here. But if you talk to party strategists, they will tell you they think there's still more seats that they can win next time round. And 20 of the 27 seats where the Lib Dems are in second place around the country are Conservative-held seats. So the vast majority of seats where they would think they might have a chance of picking up more seats in the next election are Tory-facing seats. And therefore, their messaging, you would think, needs to be focused on A, defending the seats they won of the Tories last time round, and attacking those 20 seats or so where they're still in second place to the Tories, which means more attacks on, weirdly, the opposition instead of the government. And of course, a lot of that is going to depend on who the Tories pick as their leader and what the Conservative Party actually looks like over the next few years. That is still very much in flux. We've got this beauty parade at Tory conference coming up in a couple of weeks, which should start to clarify the issue a little bit between the four leadership candidates. And until then, I think the Lib Dems are just having a good time sort of kicking the corpse of the Tory party, if you will, singing songs about Liz Truss and reminding everyone why they voted against the Tories last time round. Whether that's a strategy that you can pursue for the next 5 years, well, remains to be seen.
We've got 90 seconds to talk about what the government wants us to talk about, which is its green ambitions. David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, is going to swing into action on this subject and say that he's putting climate and the nature crisis central to his department's remit, and he's backing and endorsing and doubling down on the 2030 target to deliver clean power, which many think is one of the government's most stretching, if not impossible, targets to achieve, and saying that he's going to put these issues at the heart of his remit on the day that Ed Miliband, whose department is all about this stuff, is also giving a speech. The two men sort of both looking now to a certain extent own the green agenda. And we're heading into an autumn where, of course, you're going to have a COP climate change summit. So it'll be interesting to see quite who ends up representing the government in that and who does the heavy lifting. But David Lammy clearly determined to leave his mark on this subject.
Yeah, a bit of a random left turn for David Lammy, who spent the last 10 days obsessing over missiles in Ukraine, just to pop up and make a speech about the green agenda on the day that Ed Miliband is making a big speech about the green agenda. But there you go. Be one of the interesting things to watch for at Labour conference this because this 2030 target is by far the most difficult thing the government is promising it's going to do. As you say, no one in the industry thinks it's possible. They don't think we've got the wind turbines available in the world to make it happen. Don't think we've got the electricity grid available in this country to do what they're talking about, yet they're still promising they're going to do it. So are we going to see some big ticket announcements on this at Labour conference? We know there's no money to spend, but they're going to have to be talking a lot about this if they're actually going to make it happen. And it's an expensive old business that they're promising. So quite where the money's coming from remains to be seen.
I think time's up. We will have more for you tomorrow, Wednesday morning, as we head into Labour conference at the weekend. We'll see you then.
All right, Sam. See you tomorrow.